Hi, friends, and welcome back to the podcast. So this is episode 4 in my continuing series with Cassidy, a current high school senior who's working through the application process. We're getting close to deadlines here. So what I suggested we do is what I call an almost done doc review. And an almost done document is basically one that involves having Cassidy put her personal statement, her activities list, her additional information, and the supplemental essays for the school that she's most excited about applying to. In this case, it's Stanford. And we put them all in one doc, and then we go, okay, what are we seeing? What are we noticing? What is the application? What is it going to look like to the admission reader? She reads through each piece, and we talk about what values she sees. She shares first, and then I share what I see. And then, I gave her some notes for some potential revisions. Hope you enjoy. Hi, Cassidy. Welcome back to the podcast.
Hi.
So I have to let you know, first of all, I was at a conference, the national conference last week. I don't know why I emphasize national. I wanted it to sound special. But I had at least 4 counselors come up to me. You have fans, Cassidy.
Oh my gosh, are you serious?
You have fans. You have people out there who know you and like you and who are rooting for you.
Oh my gosh.
They came up to me and they literally said to me, I love Cassidy.
Oh my gosh. Oh, that's so sweet. What?
Yeah, it was really cool. And I was like, right? Isn't she awesome? And they were like, she's so great. And they're like all excited to know how your application turns out and excited to see where you'll end up and all these things. So I just want you to know that there's you're getting a lot of love out there already.
Oh my gosh. Oh, thank you so much.
Well, let's just jump in. How's it going? How's the writing process going? You're a couple weeks from submitting, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just curious to know, how has the writing process gone over the last couple weeks?
I feel like this one was honestly probably my hardest round of writing because I got stuck with a lot of the Stanford essays. But, oh my gosh, my college counselor at school, my school's college counselor, she's amazing. I love her so much. I just went to her to get help for some ideas or direction on where to go with my Stanford essays, and she was so helpful. She pulled up example essays and talked with me about where else I might go with the essays. So that was good. Yeah.
Amazing. And just a quick shout out to college counselors and students who are out there listening, and you're like, well, my counselor's too busy. Yo, your counselor wants to meet with you and talk with you. And please, please, please make use of your college counselor. They want to, they're there for you. So I don't know, just a shout out. And also just a shout out to college counselors who are in the work right now. I'm just so grateful for you and for every little thing you do, to quote a 90s R&B song. So yay. Okay. And I'm also curious, to whatever extent you feel comfortable sharing, I just scanned, I haven't looked at the essays in depth yet, but I scanned what you had, and it seems like you've put some work in. Could you give us a sense of how much work you've put in, how many hours you've spent? Let's just say on a given week, how many right now, it's a couple weeks before the deadline. Let's say last week, how many hours you think you put in on your application?
Yeah, I told myself that weekends would be just for college apps. So I get all my schoolwork done in the weekdays and then dedicate my Saturdays and Sundays. So Saturdays, I'll probably go to the library and then work on them from maybe 1 to 6. And then after that, I'll have dinner and then talk to my mom about them. So maybe 6-ish hours on Saturday. And then Sunday, I have church in the morning, and then I'll come back and work on them for another 5 hours-ish.
Okay. So at least what I'm hearing there is at least 11 hours. And if you're including conversations, maybe more. And you're grouping it all on the weekend. And then leading up to this, I just want y'all to know, Cassidy put in the work, y'all. And I want to say this because I talked to a couple counselors and I said, these essays didn't just as they say in, the expression in the South, they didn't just roll out of bed like that. This is the product of many iterations. So if you're listening to this, if you're a student and you're listening and you're intimidated by this, this is the product of Cassidy putting in work. A second question I want to ask you is, Cassidy, to what extent do you consider yourself a writer? Is this a way that you identify or not so much?
Honestly, not really. I don't really enjoy writing that much. I'm more of a reader, and I like talking more than writing also. But honestly, I think with the college essays, it's so different from like school essays because I can let my voice come through. So it's a lot more like talking. So I have kind of enjoyed, doing the writing for this.
Cool. I mean, that's my hope. You're kind of like the dream student in that way. Like that's what I hope, that like as they go through it, they start to like it more. And it has worked for you. It's not the case for every student. But the point that I want to make is that for students who are listening, like it's possible to write awesome essays, even if you don't consider yourself a writer, even if you don't like writing, if you're willing to put in some work. And I'm just so grateful, Cassidy, for the way that you've been able to like put in a lot of work. And I think it's yielded some really cool essays. So without further ado, what I'd love to do is I want us to do what's called an almost done review. And this is something that I do with students. You know, I encourage it on my courses. My coaches do it with students. It's a really simple thing, but anybody can do it. And it's going to give you a really great overview of what your application is leading up to. Like, what is it looking like to the reader? And the simple way that you do this is you basically put your personal statement on a Google Doc. Underneath it, you put your activities list and the descriptions. Underneath that, you put your additional information section, if you have one. And then underneath that, you put the supplemental essays for whatever early schools you're applying to. So Cassidy's put this together. We've got an almost done doc in front of us each. And once that's done, you kind of start to see, okay, this is everything that Stanford's going to get in terms of the writing pieces. What I'm going to ask you to do, Cassidy, is to read the application through. We're going to start with the personal statement. And as you're doing that, I'm going to mute my microphone so you won't hear me. I'm going to be typing and basically marking on this Google Doc the values that I see coming through in this application. And this is what I call a values scan. Now, in some cases, it's going to be values that are coming through really clearly. In some cases, there will probably be moments where it's like, I think that it's like hinting at a particular value, but it's maybe not as clear as it could be yet. And so I'll mark those. And then in some situations, and I don't know if we'll find any today, but there might be values that you feel strongly about or feel strongly committed to or connected to that just aren't showing up in the application yet. So if I spot any of those, or if as you're reading them, you're like, oh, I really want to get this more into my application, we can talk about that too. But essentially, I want you to read your personal statement through just to start. I'm going to be noticing values. I want y'all who are listening, because this is good practice, both as students and counselors, to see if, as we're going along, you can kind of play along and see if you can notice values. Because I think it's cool to see what you notice versus what I notice, and then versus what Cassidy notices. Because then I'll also ask you, Cassidy, when we get to the end, after I share some, what are some other values that you noticed? Actually, I might let you go first and share some values because it'll be easier because I'm going to be probably marking up like 10 or 20. So I'm going to probably let you go first and then share some more because I'll have the advantage of typing. And this particular exercise is one that I think you can do on your own if you want, or it's really great to do with a counselor. You could do it with a peer, have them listen to this podcast. You can kind of see how it works or how it goes. And I think it's a pretty good thing to do right around this point. We're like 2 weeks before the deadline. I say that because if you wait too long and you do this like the night before, you just have less room to make changes. So we've got a little time yet. Okay, I'm going to mute my mic. Cassidy, you're on. I want you to read this personal statement like you've never read it before. And I don't mean like in terms of quality. I mean, try and imagine that this is like something that's relatively new to you. And I'm going to be looking for values and marking them, and then I'll share what I notice. And again, y'all listening along, I want you to see if you can notice some values that maybe Cassidy and I don't end up mentioning. All right, let's hear it.
Okay. Circular black eyes, square head with rounded edges, disproportionately small body. No, this isn't an otherworldly species, or me for that matter. These are my childhood obsessions, tiny figurines that captured my heart from a young age. Funko Pops. Rather than rocks or seashells, I fell in love with collecting pop culture minifigures. Yet, it is not just the characteristic Japanese chibi style of the Pops that endears me to them, but also the shards of myself that I glimpse in their reflections. Fluffy white ears, red vest, and a tiny golden pocket watch the size of my pinky finger. My white rabbit Pop. He mirrors my ability to take an entropic situation and learn how to thrive in it. At 12 years old, my dad died suddenly, uprooting the foundations of my life and drastically reshaping our family dynamics. I learned to adjust to having only one parent, from carpooling more often to surrendering my mom's attention to my younger brother. Though tragic, it taught me how to adapt. Confronting challenges to me means reshaping my mindset to adapt to the situation rather than trying to force the situation to fit my expectations. Belle's saffron dress billows out mid-spin, her character reminding me of the power of empathy. I am, as Gen Z has coined the term, a yapper, meaning that I have a tendency to chatter nonstop. Books will never fail to have me running my mouth, doubly so if they're in the historical fiction genre. However, the death of my dad revealed to me the importance of listening, of empathizing with someone simply by remaining quiet. I see it at House of Grace, hearing the stories of addicted women seeking liberation and responding with silent recognition. Discerning the gratitude in women's voices when they grasp that they're not alone, it's clear to me that a listening ear speaks more to the heart than a rambling mouth ever could. Grinning out from the top shelf, the genie from Aladdin parallels my creative side. Just as magic is his artistic medium, ballet is mine. Whether I'm choreographing a new dance or interpreting a classic, my creativity always shines through my dancing, particularly in my love for musicality. My favorite way to accent each step is to shape it to the flow of the music. Will my pique arabesque be fluid and sustained, a la Swan Lake, or striking and flamboyant, as in Don Quixote? In this way, each variation I perform is distinct, whether or not someone else has already performed it. Through ballet, I've seen that there's value and ingenuity not only in conjuring up new ideas, but also in adding nuance to existing ones. MJ, from Marvel's Spider-Man franchise, may not be the picture of happiness, but her dry humor and ability to lighten tense situations echoes my love for laughter. From bridging the gap between 17 and 7 years old at ballet to softening my family's sorrow, I've learned that laughter is a powerful force. A giggle at my brother's deafening post-dinner burp, joining into my summer camp kids' Goofy Faces contest. Laughing might just be my favorite hobby. Now, I constantly utilize it to build relationships with others, including volunteering at the hospital. While I can't perform a joint replacement surgery, I can support patients' emotional health by stopping by their rooms to chat after my hospital task list duties are done. Cracking jokes at their bedside, I see how laughter allows others to see me as someone they can connect with, a faint reminder of their granddaughter or friend or child, and more than just the girl restocking the gloves. Tail swishing, bag of who's its and what's its in hand, Ariel reflects my curiosity. Whether I'm holding avid study hall discussions with my AP Bio teacher about RIFLIP, restriction fragment length polymorphism analysis, or researching the effects of long ER wait times on the progression of traumatic brain injuries at CNIX, I am driven by an insatiable craving for knowledge. My favorite bio-nerd moments happen when I spot a connection between textbook material and real-world applications. No one was as excited to read about polymerase chain reaction than I was when I realized that, oh my gosh, that's how COVID PCR tests were conducted. For me, the unexpected connection between the 3-step DNA proliferation process and the snot on my nose swab sparked interest in the crossover between biotechnology and medical innovation. You've probably guessed by now that I want to be a doctor. You'd be right, but more specifically, I want to be an oncologist. I truly want to save lives. In the context of a constantly evolving field on the cutting edge of medical science, my love for continuous curation of knowledge converges with deeply meaningful and relational work. Speaking of curating, I'm thinking of adding a new Funko Pop to my collection. Elizabeth Blackwell, maybe?
Wow. So I want to share impact because you only get one chance to hear an impact on somebody, especially when it's live. And I want you to know that I have tears in my eyes. And I don't know if that surprises you or not, because you just had like a surprised look on your face. But I find myself really moved by this essay at the end here. And I'm also saying wow to the depth and the quality of work that you put into this.
Oh, thank you so much.
It's just, it sings. It's just, there's so much here, Cassidy. It's just wow. It's just wow. I'm not going to have too many like constructive criticism notes for this, just so you know, because I think that if it's not done, it's very much almost done. But I just love to like pause for a second, because I'm going to ask you about the values in just a second. Well, I'm curious just on a sort of like meta level, like what was it like for you reading this essay aloud?
I don't know. I mean, I feel like I've read this essay myself so many times working on it that it's kind of like I don't know. I feel like I've read this essay so many times. It's not new or anything. But yeah, to hear you say that, yeah, thank you so much.
Do you feel that this essay, to what extent do you feel this essay represents who you are?
I think it really does represent who I am because it captures like all of my different aspects, I think. And I definitely hear my voice come through.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of those aspects. What do you feel, and this will get us into the values a little bit, but what different aspects of you do you feel like it's showing?
I think it's showing like the contrast between my love for fun and laughter and then my love for being serious and like being sensitive to other people and to my own emotions. And I think it's also showing how I love knowledge. I'm super curious and I love learning and it just makes me so happy. And also how happy I am to be involved in like all of my different extracurriculars. Like they all mean something to me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm just writing these down on a separate doc because I didn't want you to be self-conscious. I made a copy of this because I didn't want you to be like seeing me typing all over your document while you were reading. So I'll share it with you after, I promise. Yeah, I'm hearing sensitivity. There's like an emotional sensitivity and emotional intelligence that's coming through. And then there's also that nerdy side, right? That love of knowledge and the love of extracurriculars. And you're weaving them in really thoughtful ways. And by thoughtful, I mean like you're not focusing on the extracurricular activity for the extracurricular itself, but you're talking about what you've learned from it. So I'm getting insights. You're giving me information that isn't already obvious from elsewhere in your application. Quick meta note to counselors who are listening. Basically what I'm doing with Cassidy right now is I'm just using reflective language. And essentially, Cassidy, what I'm doing with you is I'm saying back to you what you're saying, but I'm saying it in my own words. Just letting you know that I hear you and like I really feel what you're saying. And I also like really agree.
Oh, thanks.
So some other things that I'm seeing here, some values. What I loved about your essays is that I wrote down values and then I saw that like as I was typing them in, you actually named them in the essay. And I didn't mind that at all. I felt that was really nice actually. So if the reader is reading fast, it makes it explicit. Sometimes students will think, well, should I show or tell? And I think in a college essay, it's totally fine to do both. In this case, you go, have I shown it clearly enough? And if it's like, oh, well, I don't know, but let me go ahead and name it. Listener, empathizer, like those things come through even more clearly when you name them. And I don't think it takes away from the essay at all. So in the second paragraph, for example, here's an example of this. I was like, somebody who can take an entropic situation and learn how to thrive in it is an adaptable person. And then later in the paragraph, you're like, hey, I'm adaptable. I've had to become adaptable. I see your commitment to family, your ability to, in some cases, help others. And then the quality that I see at the end of the second paragraph is one that I think is so important and I think is under talked about in the college admission world. But if you ask a college admission officer, do you want this? They're going to be like, absolutely. And it's the quality of perspective taking. So when I look at the end of your second paragraph, you say, confronting challenges to me means reshaping my mindset to adapt to the situation rather than trying to force a situation to fit my expectations. And that is a superpower. Like your ability to recognize that, to know that, and to do that in a moment is like amazing. And I ended up making that note like 3 or 4 times in this essay. So in the next paragraph, when you talk about books, we see your nerdy side, intellectual curiosity, which by the way, is one of the things that Stanford looks for, maybe more than anything, at least, when they were training readers up until like 5 years ago, because that's as, I've been talking with people who are as, recently coming out of Stanford. As recently as I'll say 5 years ago, they've been training their readers to look for intellectual curiosity. In paragraphs 3 and in paragraphs 5 and 6, in a big way, we really get that intellectual curiosity. Now, when I go at the end of that paragraph, you talk about how you say, actually, sorry, it's the end of the next paragraph. You talk about how through ballet, I've seen there's value and ingenuity, not only in conjuring up new ideas, but also in adding nuance to existing ones. And that's another one where it's that perspective taking where you're like, we don't necessarily need to reinvent things. We can actually just find what's working here or tweak what's already existing. And that's such an awesome quality. And it also is, maybe you don't even know it, but it's sort of setting up a theme of like your ability to think critically and to use it in lots of different ways. I see your joy in the laughter paragraph, the goofy faces contest. I love that when you said laughing might just be my favorite hobby, you literally laughed. Then I love this one. Okay, so here's one that's kind of like a quiet one, but you say, well, I can't perform a joint replacement surgery. I can support patients' emotional health by stopping by their rooms to chat after my hospital task list duties are done. Now, you say that you want to do that after the task list duties are done. To me, that shows real responsibility. Really cool. And you do that in like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 words. So the side note to those listening is like, you can even bring in these values in just a few words. Restocking the gloves. And then, there's another one, perspective taking, where it's like, you're more than just the granddaughter friend, they're more than just the girl restocking the gloves. You're connecting with them on a human level. Lots of nerdy stuff, talking about restriction, fragment length, polymorphism, but not too much, which I like. And then at the end here, when you say, you think I'm going to be a doctor, you'd be right. You've got your sense of humor there, which is beautiful. And then you have this sentence that I'm like crying just reading it. I truly want to save lives. And it's just like, that's the sentence that just rocked me. And then I love that you bring in Elizabeth Blackwell at the end. And they're going to, maybe some folks have to, Google Elizabeth Blackwell to find out who that is, but maybe that's okay. Because if they do get it, then they're going to be like, dang. So this is like a selective risk where if they don't get it, okay, you miss out something. But if they do get it, it's like, boom. It's kind of like an inside, the way that inside joke is. So you could put somebody that's a little bit more commonly known, but I don't know. I kind of like the choice here. I'm curious, did you go through other people besides Elizabeth Blackwell, and why did you land on Elizabeth Blackwell?
Yeah, I actually
And also, for those who don't know, will you just tell folks who Elizabeth Blackwell is?
Oh, she's the first female doctor in the U.S.
Mm-hmm. And did you go through other possibilities, and how did you land on her?
Initially, I was thinking about characters from Grey's Anatomy, but then I was talking about it with my mom, and I actually hadn't thought about Elizabeth Blackwell at all, but she brought it up, and I was like, wait, that makes so much more sense. So, yeah.
Fun tie to another episode. Yesterday, I was interviewing my best friend for the podcast, and he wrote for Grey's Anatomy, which is just like
what?
A weird coincidence.
That's crazy.
But I really like that you didn't necessarily just name a TV character. You were like, no, here's somebody who made a difference in history and who represents, a lot of the values that you're talking about here. Okay. Beautiful work. I only have a tiny note, but I almost hesitate to give it to you because I think that this like one tiny word actually makes it less quote unquote perfect. And I actually kind of like it. So, but I'm going to say it because I already said it. There was this tiny moment where you say, no one was as excited to read about polymerase chain reactions than I was. And I think it's like no one was excited as I was. And you said that I was. And it's so tiny that we can go through like 650 words and I'm like, okay, that's your note? Yeah, that's my note. But I also want to point out for readers reading this, like that is not going to be a make or break. Like they're not going to read that and be like, okay, you don't get into, whatever school. It's just, it's fine. It shows that you're human in an otherwise like really solid essay. We have a puppy joining us.
Sorry, can I let him in my room?
Yeah, of course, please.
Okay.
All right. Who's joined us now?
This is my dog, Augie. He's 8 years old, I think. He's a rescue, a poodle mix.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Welcome, Augie. All right, Augie, we're going to move to the activities list. Is that cool? All right. Augie says yes. All right. So Cassidy, I'm not going to read through the entire activities list because I think that's like, I don't know, less interesting or useful maybe to folks who are listening. I will separately kind of do the values scan to like do this, but let's do this with a couple of these. Let's look at a couple of these activities. I want you to read it aloud, like let's read the first description and then you tell me what values you're seeing and I'll tell you what values I'm seeing. So the first one's, you do ballet and you are a level 8 student. You spend 12 hours per week doing this. Go ahead and read this description to us.
I perform lead roles in semi-annual productions, lead exercises, and coach kids in the beginning ballet class, train in rigorous classes and rehearsals.
Beautiful. Now, as you look at that, what are the values that you hear coming through there?
I think I see work ethic when I'm training in the rigorous classes and rehearsals, and then responsibility when I'm leading the kids. And I guess maybe excellence too for performing lead roles. Maybe.
Great. Absolutely. Yeah. I don't have anything to add to that. Well, I guess besides leadership, because you use the word lead and that's kind of like responsibility, or I guess responsibility is kind of a part of leadership. But yeah, I think this one's just really solid. I don't have any notes on it. I think it's great. The next one, rehab center unit lead, info desk volunteer. You spend 5 hours a week per doing this. This was 10th through 12th grade. So so one of the things colleges are looking for is like consistent commitment. So when I look at, the ballet, you've been doing that since you were like 5 years old, which is great. The second one, you've been doing this for 3 years, also great. Read this description to us.
I direct visitors around the hospital, manage juniors, and act as a liaison between them and the clinical manager, support nurses with ancillary tasks.
Beautiful.
Ancillary.
Yeah, beautiful. So what do you notice here? What values do you notice?
I think I see more responsibility and like some communication as like in like the liaison. Yeah, for the tasks, I guess it's just like, oh, I'm able to like follow directions.
Right. I can do the things. Yeah, there's directing visitors from the hospital, manage juniors, and act as liaison between them. Of these, here's a tiny note. I think that if one of the things is to demonstrate leadership / responsibility, you might just, I think that I direct visitors around the hospital seems like something that someone, like, I'm not going to say anyone could do, but it's a little bit less exciting than managing juniors and acting as a liaison between them and the clinical manager. Like, that one to me shows more responsibility. I might suggest that you cut I direct visitors around the hospital, because that sounds like sort of like you're just like the host at a restaurant. And, and then I love this support nurses with ancillary tasks. I actually appreciate the ambiguity of that, because I imagine there's a range of things. But if you cut I direct visitors around the hospital, then what I would suggest doing, this is one of those opportunities where you could go in and go, okay, let me look at the values list and go, what's another value that I feel like I'd like to bring forth here? Or you can look back at that epic list of activities list verbs and then go, okay, what are some other things that I've done just to remember stuff, and bring forward one more thing. And you basically take those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 words and you bring in just one more value there.
Okay, cool.
Let's do one more, and then I'll send you notes on the rest of them. Selected student ambassador at your school. And I'll read this one just for variety. I spearhead on-campus CCC events, and that's College and Career Center events, to promote college and career awareness to students, run the school's Instagram or run the Career Center's Instagram account, interview new ambassadors. So hearing that, what values do you notice?
I'm seeing leadership in the spearheading the events.
Yeah.
And maybe even like a little bit of creativity in the Instagram account.
Totally. Me too. And then more responsibility, interviewing new ambassadors. Like, somebody trusts you enough to put you in charge of interviewing the new folks that are going to be. And that tells me who you are on your high school campus. Like, I like knowing that you are the person that people trust to interview the new folks, because it's not like that you're just an ambassador. It seems like you're like a lead ambassador. And even though you don't say lead ambassador, that to me implies that. I like also in your description, you've said selected student ambassador. So it's not just like, hey, I'm just, one of many here. I just signed up. Like, I was chosen for this. And you don't necessarily have to say who you were chosen by or how that process went or out of how many people. It's just fine to put selected student ambassador. Now, in some cases, quick side note, if you were selected as one of 300, I think that could be worth putting. But if it's just like you were chosen, I think that's fine. Okay. As I scan and look at the rest of this, I'm just going to kind of give the big picture awareness, just so that the listeners have a sense of some of the other things you do. So you volunteer at a substance abuse residential rehab program as a the role there is volunteer. I volunteered as a research assistant at the Physicians Cancer Center. You were a selected participant for an immersion experience on the campus of Stanford, a member of church and youth group. Also volunteer crew leader, helping to lead Vacation Bible School at church. Link crew leader. This is like leading freshmen into their high school transition. And then being a member of ASB as the Spirit Commissioner. I love that. Coordinating weekly Fun Friday activities and more. So the reason I wanted to read all of those is you kind of now get a sense of, okay, this is some of the stuff that Cassidy has done. And as you sort of look at this, as you do your own values list of, let's ask 3 questions. One, which values do you think are really coming through really strongly in your activities list? Like, you're like, oh, these 3 things are like, it's clear that I do these things. And then which ones are coming through maybe not as strong as they could? It's a harder question because you're looking at your own application, but I'm just curious. And let me give you some help with this, because here's a list of like things that colleges look for. And we're going to be doing a whole podcast series on this coming up, but let me just throw this into your document underneath this. And I'll read these aloud so that you can kind of think through them. But here are some things after doing a big analysis of what colleges look for. So we've got intellectual, by the way, not all of these things have to 100% be in your activities list. They could be in your personal statement or your supplements. But we've got intellectual curiosity, service to others, leadership or initiative, collaboration, and consistent engagement. So far, we're halfway through the application. We're not to the additional info or supplements. Let's talk about intellectual curiosity. Actually, let's just do personal statement and activities list. Do you feel like intellectual curiosity is coming through clearly so far in the application?
I think I see it in my personal statement, but maybe not as much in my activities list.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, side note, that's fine because we know that it's going to come through again in your supplemental essays. So great. What about service to others?
I think so, yeah. Volunteering at a few different places.
Yeah. I'm just looking at this. I see service to others coming through I'm going to count the activities. So there's 1, 12, student ambassador, 2, office volunteer, 3, research assistant, 4. Let's see, youth group, 5, helping with transitions into high school, 6, vacation Bible school, 7, and then spirit commissioner, 8. So I see 8 of your 10 activities, I think, have a dimension of service to others. Leadership or initiative. Let's do it this way. How many activities do you count that have some dimension of leadership or initiative coming through?
I think 1 in ballet, 2 at the hospital, 3 at the CCC, 5 at the interning, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Great. And the way that, just side note to y'all who are listening, like the way that Cassidy's doing this is using strong verbs that hint at or explicitly say leadership. So I lead X or I spearhead Y, and then also some of the responsibilities, like the fact that you interview new ambassadors, I think demonstrates that leadership. So yeah, lovely job. I agree. Let's look at the next one. Collaboration. Do we see how Cassidy is working with others, or is Cassidy kind of a lone wolf, kind of likes to do things on her own? Like, what do you sense from the essays and activities list so far? Is she good with others? Is she going to be good if we put her on a team?
No, she hates people. Collaboration, I think I could probably put that more into my application because I don't see it coming through very strongly right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think there are probably some small tweaks. So back to the personal statement, which we think is really good and could totally be submitted tomorrow. There are probably 2 moments that you could hint at collaboration and working with others. So I don't want this to be something that torpedoes your essay and you have to rewrite 3 paragraphs. I think it's more give us 2 sentences that show the kind of teammate that you are, the way that you listen. And by the way, I think that we could definitely argue there are certain moments in here that hint at being a good team member, but show us working with others in a couple moments. And then I would find maybe 1 or 2 moments in the activities list where collaboration could come through even more clearly.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay. So the third question I have is are there values that are maybe additional things that you want to bring in about yourself, things that are important to you that maybe aren't making their way into the application yet so far? And again, acknowledging that we're only personal statement and activities list in, but let's look back at your original values exercise. So we're both pulling up the doc here. So we've got this values exercise, and there are 10 different qualities that you've said that you wanted to, that are important to you. I'm going to read a couple of these: personal development, laughter, close relationships, community, spirituality. So let's just go with those for now, because those were kind of the top 5. To what extent do you feel like you're showing personal development, laughter, close relationships, community, and spirituality?
I think I show the close relationships pretty well. And I guess the community too, because I'm working at my local hospital and stuff. Spirituality, I don't know if that's really showing through right now. I have it in one of my supplemental essays for Stanford, or not even an essay, it's a short answer.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I could maybe weave that in a little more.
Cool.
Yeah.
Personal development, laughter. Laughter, I see coming through really clearly in the personal statement.
Laughter. Yeah. Personal development, I don't know. Maybe not as much on that one.
Okay. Now, just a side note that this can still be a fantastic application and you don't have to weave in your top 5 values. But as we're reading through the next half of the application, it might, be that there are certain moments that you can kind of weave these in. And again, I'm not talking about entire rewrites. I'm talking about a sentence here and there. All right. So let's do this. Let's jump into the second half and let's take a look at how the additional info section shaped up. And I'm going to not read the whole thing again. I'm going to kind of give the highlights. But we've got ballet, 14 years, and you describe, level 8, and you explain this, which I really love, highest level at my studio, classes designed for students of pre-professional caliber. Now, side note to students listening, if you put something like level 8, give us a sense of what that even means. Like, what is that? I think that's really, really important. Next, you talk about auditioning for and being accepted into a particular summer intensive. You mentioned a couple lead roles that you had. You mentioned also that you're CPR first aid certified as part of the teacher assistant training, and you serve as a role model for all the lower levels. Now, why did you choose, Cassidy, to put ballet into your additional info section?
I think it's such a huge part of my life, and there's so many different aspects of it that I really wasn't able to fit into 150 characters in the description. So I just wanted to elaborate on it and let them know these are some more stuff I've done, and this is really, really important to me.
I love that. It takes up more real estate. If we imagine that this is sort of like a map of your life so far, it's like it's like, no, that's not a house, that's a hotel. There's a lot that's gone into that. And how I determine, when I'm suggesting to students if a thing should go in or not go in, is I imagine the application without it. And I go, okay, is there something missing if we take this out? And knowing about, for example, the CPR first aid certification and knowing context on what level 8 even means, and that you got accepted into the summer intensive. These are all tiny pieces. And this is in bullet points, by the way, that piece by piece add into giving us context that I think if we just copy paste and do like Cassidy A and Cassidy B, if we don't have this information, I think it does make some, small difference. Next, we've got the hospital volunteering, 100 plus hours you've noted here. One of 2 unit leads for the rehab volunteer department. You talk about your responsibilities. There's also something specific that you did where you created and implemented this new idea of shift shadowing, which you explained very briefly. And you co-founded a rehab art and music program where you design the lesson plans for weekly hour-long arts and crafts session. This is great. I mean, again, this is the kind of stuff that, again, didn't fit in your activities list, but that gives us just a little bit more information about who you are, what you do. And you did a similar one for this physician's cancer clinic. And what's nice about this is that you talk about it from a different perspective. So this is less about sort of, leadership and helping others, and it's more about conducting qualitative research study on this particular, event that happened in Lahaina, the fires that happened there. And listen to the language here so that for folks listening, compiled list of survey participants from patient database, created and distributed survey form to participants, summarized findings from survey into write-up, and then in process of getting research findings published. Now, were you aware that you were doing quote unquote something different in this description from the hospital volunteering one before?
No.
So the different thing that I see you doing is this is more about the research side of you and the compiling findings, working with a database, whereas the one above is more about working with others, creating a program, both of which are going to be awesome aspects of, being a medical professional. But what I see in here is here's me working with others, here's me creating a program, and here's me doing the nitty-gritty of the spreadsheets and the database and compiling data. And I'm okay doing both, essentially, is what you're saying here, I think.
Cool. I didn't even think of that.
Cool. Well, it's working really well, and it's something that I think other students listening can learn from as well. All right, so let's jump into the supplemental essays. So these are the ones for Stanford, which are due pretty soon. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'd love for you to just read the prompt and then maybe just the word limit, and then read the essay. And as you're doing this, I'm going to be marking the values as we go, and I'm going to ask folks who are listening along to kind of play along and do the same thing. So let's start with this first one here.
Okay, the first prompt is: the Stanford community is deeply curious and driven to learn in and out of the classroom. Reflect on an idea or experience that makes you genuinely excited about learning. And the word limit is 250 words. I wrote, simply put, an organism at equilibrium is a dead organism. When I learned this in AP Biology, my color-coding, day planning, organizational freak self was appalled. How can a system in complete balance not be at its peak? Actually, the goal of a system is to maintain homeostasis, a kind of dynamic stability that trumps static equilibrium. Learning to distinguish between homeostasis and equilibrium taught me to be a catalyst for change-making. Without fear that any change to a system's balance will throw it perilously out of order, I've grown to love self-advocacy and spontaneity. This past summer, interning these values were especially distinct. I constantly metabolized new information, interpreting blood work results, for example, or identifying tumors on a CT scan. However, when she fell ill, I had to pivot. Shadowing the office's nurse practitioner, performing administrative work, and bonding with the nurses, I gained a more nuanced understanding of the clinic's approach to cancer care. Through homeostasis, I've learned that stability doesn't necessarily entail symmetry. In cell biology, this means that cells proliferate at different rates based on the body's needs. When the mechanisms that regulate this stable asymmetry fail, carcinogenesis, cancer initiation, occurs, a huge topic in cancer research. Through Bio40S, Advances in Cancer Biology Research and Cancer Treatments, I'll delve into the scientific advances in said research. I'm excited for my learning in this ever-expanding field to be perpetual and dynamic. Homeostatic, one might say.
Cool. All right, before we get into values, I'm curious, because I know you worked on this essay. You emailed me in between to say that you were still working on it. How do you feel about it? What do you feel like is working well, and what do you feel like, do you have any questions about it as you read it aloud?
Yeah, so I tried to bring in like a specific aspect that I'd be able to get at Stanford. So this was like a class, I brought in a class at Stanford, and I tried to make it seem like I haven't like just like learned something, but I'm also still excited to keep learning at the end. But maybe I would still be a little confused between homeostasis and equilibrium, so I could probably clear that up a little more. And honestly, maybe like just the tone of the whole essay, make it sound a little more excited.
Okay, cool. Yeah. I just to reflect back, I love that you worked in a course there. And I like that it just really feels in keeping with the tone of the essay that you would still be in process, as it were. There was a moment here in the second paragraph, I'm going to read it back to you, where I felt like there was a jump, and I found myself curious about what happened in the jump. So I'm going to reread the beginning. Simply put, an organism at equilibrium is a dead organism. When I learned this in AP Bio, my color-coding, day-planning, organizational freak self was appalled. How can a system in complete balance not be at its peak? I think this is a lovely opening because you're working in just a few sentences. You're getting in that you're organized, you're willing to be vulnerable, and a little sense of humor, which I think is lovely. In the next paragraph, there's sort of a jump forward, and it makes me wonder, well, how did this happen? So let me read it out loud. Actually, the goal of a system is to maintain homeostasis, a kind of dynamic stability that trumps static equilibrium. Okay, so first of all, with that's a big idea, and it might be worth, I sometimes call this like slowing down in the essay. And what I mean by this is like doing a little bit of translation just to make sure that everybody's on board with what you've said so far. Because there are lots of words in there. Maintain homeostasis, dynamic stability, trumps static equilibrium. And so there might be something here that you could kind of include to just be like, here's what I'm talking about, or just to make sure we're kind of all on the same page. The part I'm most interested in looking at is the next part. Learning to distinguish between homeostasis and equilibrium taught me to be a catalyst for change making. Now that sounds awesome. And the note that I wrote on your doc was, how? How did learning to distinguish between these two things teach you to be a catalyst for change making? And of course, I'm wondering part two, and then what did that change making look like in your life? The next sentence says, without fear that any change to a system's balance will throw it perilously out of order, I've grown to love self-advocacy and spontaneity. Now, that's cool and raises other questions about like, great, how does that spontaneity manifest itself? But if we just look at that second sentence, that second paragraph, it kind of made me wonder if this is like sort of like the insight at the end of the essay, potentially, that there's sort of like a journey from version A of you where you're like, equilibrium, wait, that's good, balance, right? And then something happens to you and you realize, actually, there's this other thing, this other way of thinking about balance in a way. And it seems like there's some cool stuff that potentially you could work in between those. So it doesn't have to go this way, but my curiosity is like, if 250 words is enough to do sort of like a before and after, if you imagine there's a before, I was this way, some stuff happened, and then after I was this way, that could be like a really simple structure. Side note to anybody listening, this is really kind of a useful, we'll call it a narrative/challenges structure for an essay. And the way it works is simply you raise a question at the start, we see you go on a journey, and then you learn something related to the answer. Not necessarily solve the problem, but you gain some insight. Now, I think it would be useful if the insight is relevant both to your work with science and also to your work with life. So I'm just going to ask a couple leading questions. What did you learn about science? And what did you learn about life? So all the stuff after that, the next two paragraphs, which if I do a quick word count, it looks like it's about 157 words. I want you to take that and put it somewhere and leave it and know that it's there. And I want to ask if you, for the next time you do this, and maybe you can, email me before at least a week or so before you submit it. But like, what happened in between who I was and who I became? And then for the who I became part, I would love to see both science insight and life insight. I think that could be a cool, and the reason I'm trying to I'm being really directive because we're so close to deadline, but I think that that's about as much as you can do in a 250-word essay. Now, cool. I'm pausing for a second to see if there are any other possibilities for structure, because I think that structure could work. But another way to do this, it's a little bit harder, I think, but is you go, here's who I was, part one. Part two, here's what I would eventually learn. So kind of like the thesis. And then there's some sort of question that's like, but I didn't get there immediately, but here's how I got there. Or, but here's how I learned the lesson or something. And then you take us through how you learned the lesson. So what that might sound like is equilibrium, not good. Homeostasis, better, equals better. Here's how I learned it. And then you take us through the lesson. And then I think at the end, you would probably want to come back to like some kind of insight or so what moment. So what I'm trying to do is just acknowledge that there was a logic into the thing that you were trying to do. I think we would just need something in between parts 2 and 3 that would help basically raise another question. And I think either of those could work. I think it might be easier to do the first structure we talked about. Thoughts?
Yeah, that sounds good. I mean, yeah, thank you for the direction too.
Okay.
So yeah, I'll try to work with that for sure.
Cool. Sometimes I get self-conscious about being so directive in the thing, but I mean, basically what I'm giving you is a very simple sort of, here's who I was, then this thing happened, here's who I became structure. And I think it's useful here. And for students listening, I think that can be useful for other essays. Okay. And the reason I'm not, by the way, going into values for that part, because I think that the middle part of the essay where you talk about the stuff you did, like the sciencey stuff, I think some of that's going to change. I think still lean on intellectual vitality, intellectual curiosity, show them you can do Stanford level work, especially if in the prompt it's talking about learning. It used to be the word intellectual. But I would say, so still keep that strong thing, but I'm not going to analyze the values because I feel like a lot of that's going to change. Side note to counselors, if you're doing this with a student, I wouldn't rush to the values work because then the student thinks, oh, then I have to keep all those things to keep all those values in. And instead, I paused and went, hey, let's maybe work on this piece, and then you can do the value scan later. So just wanted to name that. All right, let's move on to the roommate essay. How does that sound?
Yeah, sounds good. This prompt asks, virtually all of Stanford's undergraduates live on campus. Write a note to your future roommate that reveals something about you or that will help your roommate and us get to know you better. And this also has a 250-word limit. So I wrote, Dear Roomie, below are the 4 most important things to know about me. Very, very important. I'm an ugly, snotty crier. I'm also brutally unphotogenic and I have a horrible posture despite being a practically lifelong dancer. This is not to forewarn you that you're rooming with a troll. I'm human, I promise, but I believe in oversharing as an avenue to encourage candor within a relationship. However, if my oversharing becomes TMI, or if my troll-like posture unnerves you, please be honest with me. I love fonts. I'm in love with the seemingly infinite variety of them, how tiny nuances and strokes can create a wholly unique style. My notebooks are covered in calligraphic lettering and designs, my way of expressing my maker side. If you need a handmade birthday card, I can make one. I'm my mom's twin. Seriously though, people I barely know have approached me about seeing my mom in the wild. It's a little disorienting. Do I look 50 years old or does she look 17? But I'm honestly proud to resemble my biggest role model. I hope, beyond just appearance, that I also reflect her patience and maturity. Have you heard of Feynman technique? I'm the biggest fan of active recall study methods, like Fiveable's practice quizzes, and will champion them whenever possible. So any muttering about hyperbolic trig that you overhear is me digesting the day's lessons, not a sign that your roommate is crazy. Probably. I can't wait to meet you. Hugs, Cassidy.
Love it. What do you like about this one? Let's just go there. And if you want to weave in values, great.
For this one, I do like how I think my voice is showing through. It's like, honestly, like how I would talk in person, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Let's just do a values scan real quick. What are some of the values that you notice coming through?
I think in the first paragraph, I wove in a little bit of honesty and like candor. And then I was talking about variety and like creativity. And then I was talking about family and a little bit of patience and maturity. And then I just nerded out a little bit.
Totally. I see all those things. And like, I love there's a quality of self-effacing humor that you're leaning on here, which I think is really fun. And it sort of breaks up the more serious stuff. And even like, the nerdy parts of you, that the ending, not a sign that your roommate is crazy, parentheses, probably. There's a really small touch here too. When you put hugs, Cassidy, you sign it with a small 8, hugs. And I actually really like that because it feels like I think this is exactly what they're looking for. It's like, who are you when you're just talking, you're just hanging out? I love that you bring in the maker side because that's something we haven't gotten elsewhere. I think that's lovely. I love that you're like not shy about being like, yeah, I'm my mom's twin. That feels like something that shows maturity. And then you have a great relationship with her. It's just really beautiful. Yeah, there was a tiny way that I was like, this is such a tiny note. I don't even know if I want you to change anything, but is it like so much self-effacing in the second paragraph that it's like, okay, we get it. Like, could you remove, for example, the second troll-like posture? Like, is it, okay, I'll give you an example. I could see someone reading this. So, okay, I was in the car with my daughter, who is 9 now, and we were singing Hamilton, and she was with a friend of hers, and the friend was singing Hamilton too, and we were like rocking out. I thought we were having a great time. And then afterwards, I was like, hey, Zola, do you think Sahara, like, what did Sahara, did she say anything about like hanging out? She's like, yeah, she says she thinks you're cool, but like that you try too hard. And I was like, what?
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, was I trying too hard? And then I was thinking about like, oh, I really wanted my daughter's friend to like me. And so there was maybe a little bit of like trying too hard vibes coming through. Now, as I look at this essay, I'm like, is Cassidy trying too hard here? And I go, well, it's probably pretty true that Cassidy wants the imagined roommate and also Stanford to like her. So I would say do another scan. And if you feel like there are any moments where you're like, okay, maybe I'm trying a little too hard there, maybe dial it back. And the only time I really noticed that was in the second paragraph. This is another super tiny note, but there's a weird thing about the Stanford roommate essay where students feel really inspired to use exclamation points. So tiny note, if you use 2, I think it's great. But as students start to become more effusive, sometimes I'll read one of these and they'll have like 6 or 8 exclamation points. And I think it's just a way of seeming casual, but I didn't feel like there were too many here. I just thought it was worth pointing out if you do any tweaks. But yeah, I think this is lovely. It feels fun. It feels like it shows other sides of you. I see the values, but they're not like overwritten. It feels like they're brought in really nice ways. So yeah, I don't have too many notes.
Cool. Thank you.
Cool. Next one. Let's do it, shall we?
Okay. This is the last 250 word Stanford prompt. And it says, please describe what aspects of your life experiences, interests, and character would help you make a distinctive contribution as an undergraduate to Stanford University. And I wrote, after losing my dad, the overwhelming stagnance of grief sparked in me a need to be a self-starter, to do more than just gain back the parts of myself that I had lost, but also discover new ones. It also kindled my identity as an advocate for emotional cognizance in the face of our growing instinct to drown out uncomfortable feelings. As a result, I personify a culmination of arts, sciences, and the human connection that bridges the two. Maneuvering the grieving process, I found self-expression in my body when I couldn't find it in words. Ballet enabled me to embody a narrative with the lines and curves of my limbs. And when a patient of the oncologist that I shadowed showed me a picture of his son, 17 years old, like me, my heart cried out for this boy who might too lose his father, and I was hit with a profound desire to save lives through medicine. At Stanford, I see these 3 distinct identities converging. Warming up for class at my home studio, AOC Ballet, I picture myself doing the same backstage of Dinkelspiel Auditorium, preparing to perform with Cardinal Ballet Company. I also hope to work at the Cannery Crest program to research the mechanisms that underlie abnormal cell growth. This will allow me to better understand the root causes of carcinogenesis and contribute to advancements in cancer treatments. Pairing Psych 131A, How to Think Like a Shrink, with Stanford's The Bridge Club, I'll champion the importance of holding space through peer counseling. Donned in a lab coat and point shoes, I see myself making both direct and overarching impacts to and through the Stanford community.
Awesome. All right. Back to you. What's your evaluation of this? What do you think's working well? What do you think could use work, or what do you have questions about?
I think I tried to connect like all the opportunities that I would take advantage of at Stanford to like personal parts of myself. So it's not just like, oh, like I want to do this, but it's like I want to do this for a reason. I think I can maybe talk about more about the impact I'd have on the community and not just what I'd take away from it, because that's a big part of the prompt actually. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So I like this. I love the structure of this. I think that bringing up 3 different identities is great. And I think that the word limit is pretty, I think there might be, okay, so there's like, you get to the midpoint where you're like, at Stanford, I see these 3 distinct identities converging. There's like, we're at like 167 there, and there's a 250 word essay. So it leaves about 90 or so for the second part. And I actually think for this essay, which is a really popular one, by the way, many schools have this, many selective schools, I should say, have this prompt. So side note, anybody who's listening, heads up, this one, you might end up writing this one if you're applying to selective schools. And this one especially became popular after a Supreme Court decision to ban race-conscious admission. So anyway, there's more on that in a guide that we'll link. But so I see the two, so I see self-starter, I see advocate, and then what's the third identity? What would you call it?
Wait, I don't see it.
Because you mentioned at Stanford, I see these 3 distinct identities converging, and I was like, I wonder which one you're talking about. Because you talk about self-starter, super clear, advocate, and then I guess I see the potential for 2 different identities in the second half of the first paragraph. So what's the identity that you want to hone in on there?
Oh my gosh, I was actually talking about arts, sciences, and then human connection as the 3 identities.
Oh, so the identity. Okay. I think I'm making identity mean something slightly different. So I guess I'm thinking of identity as some of the stuff that was like on your brainstorming exercise.
Wait, no, I don't know.
I mean, it could be. I think that like these seem to be like arts, sciences, those seem to be like, they seem to be disciplines. They seem to be like, fields of interest. They seem to be like different things, identities. So I guess my question would be, if you wanted to go with arts, sciences, and human connection, I guess my question would be, as an artist, who do you embody as an artist? I mean, it could be that it's just the artist identity. So almost like think of it like as the avatar, but there might be something even more specific. So it could be, for example, that, I'm just going to like, let me see. So let's say I don't know, your love of the arts. When you're doing ballet, for example, who are you when you're on the stage, when you're in the rehearsal room, when you're working with others? Because I think getting into some of that would give us a sense of the kind of person you're going to be on the Stanford campus. More on that in just a minute. And then I really love this advocate identity. I just think that's wonderful. I think it's related to human connection, but it's like, yeah, it just feels really powerful. And then again, I'm wondering how does that manifest on the Stanford campus? And then TBD for the third one, I think you've got some interesting different options here. But then another way to do this, so for anybody who's listening, the other way that you can do this is go and look at the 3 different things, whatever you research that you want to get involved with on campus. And the reason I think the rule of 3 is nice, I think it's pretty good for a 250 word essay. Like you can probably talk about 3 different things. So you talk about being involved with Cardinal Ballet. You talk about being involved with, researching through this Canary Crest program. And then you talk about being involved, and potentially taking, either getting involved in this course or maybe getting involved in Stanford's The Bridge Club. So the thing that I'm wondering about as I listen to you talk about these is, who are you going to be when you walk in the door? So you come into Cardinal Ballet, like, what is this identity beyond just like, I'm a dancer or I'm a, ballerina? Like who are you? Are you the enthusiast? Are you the connector? Are you the catalyst? Are you the, you know what I mean? So I think it might be good to go back to that roles and identities exercise, which for anybody who's like, wait, what is he even talking about? Check out an earlier episode, but we'll link to it in the show notes here. I'd love to see if you could even more specifically go, okay, based on my interest in being involved in ballet, here's the identity that I'm going to bring. You know, it's sort of like the identity within the artist, because I think artist is kind of like a broad term that could encapsulate dancer and lots of other things. But I guess I wonder, like, what kind of dancer are you going to be? And what kind of human are you going to be as you are, you know, in this dance environment? Same thing for, as you're talking about researching the mechanisms that underlie abnormal cell growth. So again, I'm like, cool, you've done your research, you're going to get involved in this, but I want to know, like, who are you going to be in the lab, or who are you going to be in the halls of the, you know, whatever it is, the hospital or the research, you know, facility. And then for the, like, how are you going to make a difference? And then for the third one, you hint at one here, which is nice. You say, I'll champion the importance of holding space. So if I just like convert that one quickly, it's like, I am a space holder, or I am an empathizer, or something like that. And I think you kind of hint at that already in the first half of your essay. But what I'm going to suggest is a mostly rewrite for this one. And the way to do this, I think, will just be to outline it. And the way to do it is like, pick 3 identities, show how each of those identities has developed, and then show how each of those identities will manifest in these particular areas that you've mentioned. So an example of this would be, I'm going to use an example that's not you. When I first got involved in robotics, that's a cheesy example, but maybe that's better. That's cheesy. I am, in my robotics team, I am the catalyst. I'm the one coming up with ideas. I'm the one who's, let's try this and try this. A lot of the ideas fail, but hey, my team can always count on me to come up with 6 more. Okay, pause. There's the other 2 identities. But then at Stanford, I want to catalyze in this particular robotics opportunity. I want to be the one who's coming up with stupid ideas, blah, 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 blah. That's the kind of thing that I'm talking about. So you've got some nice options. I'm going to suggest these first 157 words that you just cut them and put them somewhere else. And the reason I'm telling you to put them somewhere else is that I think that, side note to anybody listening, I think that if you keep them on the doc, you kind of obsess about the way that you used to say it, and you kind of like it, especially if you revise it a few times. So it's just easier to put it out of sight and then create the new outline. Don't see this as being like, okay, I've wasted all this time. No, you found a potential new outline. So again, just to simplify, 3 identities, how they each developed, and then how are they going to manifest on the campus specifically. I would suggest for this one, probably if you can get to it, 100 words for the identities and more like 150 for how they'll manifest on the campus. Think of the first part as really just set up for what you'll put later. Many students will flip this. They'll just spend most of their word budget talking about who they've been, 200 words, and then 50 words about how they'll manifest on campus. And I want you to try and flip it. Maybe you'll get to like 50-50. How does that sound?
Yeah, that sounds cool. Thank you.
Great. Make edits, and then when you're ready, maybe you can tweak all of these and then just tag me in each of them that you want me to look at.
Okay, cool.
All right. Should we do the short answers?
Yes.
Let's do it.
Okay, the first one asks, what is the most significant challenge that society faces today? This is 50 words, by the way. And then I said, discourse has begun giving way to debate. As the goal of discussion shifts from community engagement to individual victory, conversations become increasingly likely to result in ostracization rather than communication development. On a larger scale, I fear the succession of empathy by pride.
Okay. I'm just going to jump in here with some thoughts. There's so many cool ideas in here, but I feel like I'm a little bit searching for what is the significant challenge. So without looking at it for a second, let me just challenge you. Can you say back to me, what is the most significant challenge that society faces? Try to do it without looking at what you've written, and that's hard to do, but that's kind of like, it's a way that I'm like challenging you here. What is the most significant challenge? And you don't have to say it in like any kind of like fancy way, just like, what's at the heart of it for you?
I think like the last sentence, like empathy being replaced by pride. And then like we see that in the way it manifests in like really dogmatic debates.
Mm-hmm. And why is that a big deal?
Because I feel like empathy is like our way of connecting with each other. And if we like lose that to our pride, then we like distance ourselves from like each other and like the rest of society. And we don't get that like community building that's so important for our emotional well-being.
Mm-hmm. So when you say empathy giving way to pride, the way it lands for me is like, I think I know what you're talking about, but there's some ambiguity when I hear that. And I'm like, and I go, well, what do you mean? Like, can you think of examples? The challenge with this is 50 words. And so it's like, ooh, with this prompt, you kind of want to come up with something that's like broad, but not too broad, specific, but not too specific. And that's the weird thing about this prompt. So I wonder if I would say, come up with like 3 to 5 different ways of saying empathy giving way to pride. And I would challenge you to think about specific examples of this, because it might lead to, oh yeah, I could weave in this example to show this thing, or it might lead to a different phrasing of the thing that I want to say. And I guess I would challenge you to come up with something that you could maybe even start with at this, put at the start of the essay so that the reader goes, okay, cool. I think I know what you're talking about. Because it feels like it sort of is ramping up, and then you say the thing at the end, and that's when I have even more questions. So challenge for this one, can you put the thesis or the thing, the answer at the start, and then expand on it just briefly, maybe with a couple examples, and just be open to maybe that phrasing changing.
Okay.
The reason I'm suggesting do a few different options is that sometimes that relieves the pressure of needing to like get it perfect on one. And so sometimes, students will hear me say that. I'll be like, come up with 3 options for this one. And they'll be like, 3. And I'm like, yeah. And chances are one of those is bound to be interesting or cool, and it just frees your brain up a little bit to just be like quantity over quality. So, all right, let's move on.
Okay. The second one asks, how did you spend your last 2 summers? I said 2023, first time traveling with family since my dad's passing 4 years ago. Learned to drive. And then 2024, delved into neuroscience concerns like acquired psychopathy, explored careers in psychiatry, found my calling in oncology. Researched how social determinants of health factor into healthcare access. Drove my brother to volleyball practice.
I love this. This is really sweet. I don't really have many notes for this. It feels accessible. It feels like you've got some like cool, smart stuff you did, It feels like I can see, you mentioned earlier when we talked about the values, the personal growth aspect. And I can see that here with the way that you're exploring psychopathy, psychiatry, and then oncology. Like I see that personal development side of you. I love the connection back to family. Now that I mention it though, because I worry that I'll forget to say it to you again, if personal development and growth is a big part for you and a big thing, I would say once we're done here, and even as you're, making some tweaks on a couple of these essays, I wonder if there are 1 or 2 more places where you could work in a clear commitment to personal development, because I think it's something that's so important to you, and I think it's kind of coming through, but I think that you could maybe find 1 or 2 more moments. But this is lovely. I think this is really nice.
Okay, thanks. The next one asks, what historical moment or event do you wish you could have witnessed? And I said, 1730s. Marie Camargo, a trailblazing ballerina, performs a routine with cabrioles and entrechots, jumps previously executed only by men. Her vivacious brilliance recasts perceptions of how women should dance in ballet. I wish I could tell her that Grand Allegro, big jumps, is my favorite part of dancing.
Cool. What I like about this is, 1, it's connected to someone you love. 2, it's probably teaching the reader about someone from history that they're not familiar with. My question to you is, if you had to say, here's the value here's what I want them to get about me in this particular answer, what do you feel like is the sort of like leading value? What do you want them to get about you?
I think I want to kind of show my side for like feminism or like gender equality.
Oh, cool. Okay. I see some of that here with jumps previously executed only by men. Her vivacious brilliance recast perceptions of how women should dance in ballet. Cool. Okay. And then this final sentence here, I wish I could tell her that Grand Allegro, big jumps, is my favorite part of dancing. I think there's a way that I think this works, by the way. I think if you were to submit it tomorrow, I'm not mad. But there's a way that there's something about that last sentence that I think the reason I asked the question is that it made a little bit less clear to me what the main thing was. And so if the focus is feminism, and I think that you kind of set that up nicely with the first and second sentences, you might potentially tweak this one so that it really just like drives the point home, whatever the point is you want to make. This is me like being super like fine-tooth combed here, but I do think that's a new, cool, you have mentioned being an advocate in a different way earlier in the essay. I think this is a new, cool element to potentially bring in here.
Cool. Cool. Thank
Great.
you.
Yeah. 2 more. Here we go.
Woo! Okay. The next one asks, briefly elaborate on one of your extracurricular activities, a job you hold, or responsibilities you have for your family. And then I wrote a few different versions for this one. The first one is about my role as a CCC ambassador. So I said, college day, Coco and congrats, senior reveal. As a CCC ambassador, I meticulously plan each event in hopes of connecting another person to the CCC's resources. I've always been thrilled for college, but I hope my excitement for post-secondary plans is palpable enough to spread to my peers, too.
Cool. Let's read the next one.
And then I wrote about House of Grace. I said, in between my official duties of answering calls and organizing donations at House of Grace, I bond with the shelter's residents. When a resident tells me I remind her of her niece, I glow at the idea that I might make the time between the reunions seem a little shorter.
Cool. So I love the vibe in each of these. In the first one, in the CCC one, it feels like, oh, okay, cool. I can see that you're going to be like active on campus. You know, if you're not an RA, like as a freshman, probably as a sophomore, and you know, like you're going to get involved. For the second one, I see that you're somebody who volunteers. You know, that community service aspect is sort of echoed. One of the elements that I would love to think of this as an opportunity for is we talked briefly about collaboration. And one of the things you noted is that as you looked at your personal statement, you're like, yeah, I don't know if collaboration is necessarily coming through as strongly as it could. I think with either of these activities, there's an opportunity to show us what is it like having Cassidy in the room? Like, what is it like talking to her? Who is she? How does she treat people? What's that like? So, and I don't have a strong preference for which you decide to do this with. I actually would suggest, because I know you're a worker, like try it with both. Try it with each of these and see which one more, easily, more effectively could demonstrate what it's like having Cassidy on my team. Yeah.
Cool. Yes, that sounds good.
Great. And it's 50 words. So
yeah.
Again, I'm not mad if you submit one of these tomorrow, but I think it could come through even stronger.
Awesome.
All right. Last one. Here we go.
Yay. Okay.
You're so awesome.
List 5 things that are important to you. I said my screw-ridden plastic bone from an orthopedic surgery program, Bob Marley summers and Noah Kahan winters, youth group evenings hosted at my house, pummeling and getting pummeled by Shy Guy, little brother, and Yoshi, mom, during Mario Kart game nights, shrieking with my friends when we get the perfect titration.
Cool. So I'll just tell you what I'm seeing here. So I'm seeing, nerdy side, right? Back to science. I'm seeing just like hang out, chill, what you listen to. I'm also seeing some of that connection to spirituality in a subtle way, which is nice. I love the mom and brother thing. That feels really fun and really sweet. And then shrieking with my friends, we get the perfect titration. Again, is sort of that like nerdy, sciencey side. So here's what I want you to do. I think this final one is working well, but, and again, I wouldn't be mad if you submitted it right away, but I want you to go back through your application, back to the everything I want colleges to know about me, the values list, and I want you to evaluate and go, okay, are there any pieces of me that I feel like should be revealed or could be revealed even more clearly? And then you use that sort of like 5 things I want you to know about me as like a place where you could like switch out any one of those things. Because what you have, the qualities there are great. They're just things that we've seen in the application already. So not bad. Just like, is there anything else you want to kind of work in there? And I want you to just like, work on these, I don't know, for like a week or so, and then tag me if you would, and I will send you notes. And then I think the next time that our listeners are going to hear from you is maybe when you're finding out about schools and stuff. So I'm excited, and I imagine other folks are too. So I just want to say thanks, Cassidy, again, for like being willing to do this here with me.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. I've loved working with you, and you're so awesome. And yeah, thank you so much.
Well, it's my pleasure, and I will see you sooner rather than later. I mean, tag me in the Google Doc like really soon, okay?
Okay, got it. Okay,
Talk
thank
soon.
you. Bye.
Hi, friends. Thanks again for listening. We will check in with Cassidy right around acceptance time to see how things turned out. And I don't know, who knows? Maybe we'll do another little session in there on, some other part of the process. TBD on that. I'm so excited to intro the next series. This is called my Storytelling and Identities series. And basically, I'm going to be interviewing 3 different friends who are screenwriters and television writers and talking to them about how their identities shape their work. So stay tuned for that. I can't wait for y'all to listen. One of them is even a video podcast with my friend Dave. So stay tuned. If you haven't already, check out what's going on at collegeessayguy.com. The best way to do that is to basically opt into anything on the website. Again, that's collegeessayguy.com. And yeah, stay curious.